Europe Winter Championship. It's time to get into our second decider match between Diggen and BunnyHoppor. A couple of Norwegian brothers going at it. Well, not brothers, they're friends, but it feels like they're brothers because they come so long in that journey. And alongside casting with us this entire time in our journey has been HearthVoDs and Raven. How you guys enjoying that first match? It was pretty action-packed, back and forth.
Yeah, certainly was. All 5 games. What a way to start today. Really interesting to see the Hunter do so well. Like it was mentioned that both of the Hunter players are now in the top 4.
Feels like it's sort of these wild card class. Remember Rogue last week? Last week we had both of the Rogue players, there's only 2 of them, get into the top 4 as well. One of them won the tournament. Do you think that's an indication of what we might expect for the rest of the matches today, Raven?
Yeah, I think it's just really interesting bringing a class that isn't too common in the current metagame and actually just exploiting that maybe gap in a lot of people's lineups where they can't really prepare for a deck that they're not expecting. So, and we've seen it do pretty well so far.
All right, well, we do want to take this opportunity to remind you guys before we go into the next series that we're going to be revealing a legendary minion from the Old Gods expansion prior to the final match. So stick around. I know you guys are enjoying the Hearthstone. A lot of people are watching the conclusion of some of these storylines going through the entire weekend. But don't forget that the ultimate big reveal will be really fun right before our grand finals. We have a few more matches getting into it. While you're there, just checking out the browser or you're watching along mobile, get on social media, #HCT, and tell us who you guys are pulling for the next match between BunnyHoppor and Diggen. Again, both from Norway. Well, at least that's what they're representing. I know some of them, there's like one of them studying in Norway versus one of them is actually from it, but it's a really cool story. And HearthVoDs, I think you've been watching both these players go at it so far. Do you have any opinions on who's favored based off their lineups or based off their play so far?
I believe their lineups were quite similar to each other, and based on the way that they have been playing, they're also fairly equal in skill. So it's definitely going to be a hard-fought battle between these friends.
I think what's really funny too is you mentioned that they have similar lineups. They did practice with each other before the prelims. However, for the finals itself, since they both qualified, they practiced independently. However, they came up with the same exact lineups. It's a very weird coincidence. Is it something in the water over there, the very fresh, pure water that you can drink straight from the ground, that makes it just think something? It's very funny coincidence, is it not, Raven?
Yeah, I think it's the fact that because they just sort of met up at a tournament and they sort of hit it off and was like, yeah, okay, let's practice together for prelims. They're both clearly similar style players, and I was actually speaking to them beforehand. I was like, okay, how similar are your actual decks? Because the lineups are pretty almost exactly the same. And they're like, yeah, there's probably about 10 or 12 cards across all of the decks that are different. So it's like, wow, okay, we're hopefully going to see some good mirror matches and see who can navigate these decks better.
Looks like the votes are in. A few more people are pulling for BunnyHoppor. Looks like Diggen has some votes, but he's struggling over there. I think people might be feeling maybe BunnyHoppor's name is cooler, or they really like the fact that he has his PhD. I mean, I think Diggen also, people were really repping his Han Solo look, and he was just kind of going a little bit more embracing that kind of aspect of engaging into the crowd. So right now, before we go into our second match of the day, we got a chance to speak both with BunnyHoppor and Diggen yesterday about facing each other in this high-stakes match. Let's take a listen and hear what they have to say about each other.
So I'm playing Diggen tomorrow, and we're both in Gamers League. So we've both successfully discussed like what to ban, what to pick.
BunnyHoppor is more like a 50-50. We have pretty similar decks.
We're actually, for the first time, faced with somebody else who plays this aggro paladin. I think it might change up a few things.
Yeah, I might do something different. I don't know yet.
It would feel great and bad at the same time to beat Diggen, because you don't want to beat your friend, but you definitely want to be in the semifinals.
Yeah, I still have a big chance to win the whole thing. Han Solo, boys.
To Diggen, I would just say best of luck. I hope I win.
To my next opponent, good luck.
That's right, straight out of a TV show, the friends who helped each other get this far will also be each other's obstacles to get to the semifinals, where, again, the prize money also does rank up as you get to the top 4, but it's also points too. Keep in mind that if you aren't able to qualify by winning this tournament, you also get the points which do rack up at the end of the year, so even that's also relevant. They definitely want to win this match.
Yeah, there's a lot on the line. Even though these guys are friends outside of the game, they're definitely going to do everything in their power to take each other down.
And with that, the bans are in. We have the Warlocks on both sides. And remember, these guys have similar lineups across the board. Druid, Paladin, and Warrior.
They just decided we're just going to mirror this completely and just have as many mirror matches as possible. So I kind of like it, actually.
Even the bands mirror each other, and it's just it really shows. We haven't seen all that many mirror matches in the past. I don't know if we saw seen any match in the tournament or even in the America's Championship last weekend where there would have been 2 players with the exact same lineups and band strategy.
All right, well, let's get to know our players and introduce them. Our first one from Norway is Diggen.
So Diggen is the Norwegian god of Hearthstone. He's seeming pretty confident overall. He had a couple of rough games yesterday, but his overall play style is just going to be interesting because it's so similar to his opponent, BunnyHoppor, but seems pretty happy. And also one of the positive things, if you're playing against a friend, even worst case scenario and you lose, then at least your friend goes through to the next day.
Yeah, highly critical of his own play style, always looking to improve at this tournament especially. We'll see if Diggen's able to correct himself for the final day. Up against his opponent, also from Norway, it's BunnyHoppor.
Yep, BunnyHoppor, 23 years old, from Germany, studies in the University of Oslo. Very strong player, very smart player. In the past, he has played chess competitively for 10 years.
10 years, man. Yeah. 10 years ago, I don't even know what I was doing. Definitely not advancing my own intellectual abilities by challenging myself through strategy games. BunnyHoppor, at this stage, he's also a player that people weren't really expecting to go very far, and he was saying that he wants to really represent not just himself, but also his team and also his country. He feels very proud, even though he's from Germany. He says he's really happy to represent Norway because he's enjoying his time studying.
Yeah, it's kind of good from BunnyHoppor as well because I think one of his interview yesterday, he accepted that on the first day he didn't play too well, and that he feels like he improved as time went on. So that's really important as well to take it as a positive. Know when you've kind of maybe made a couple of mistakes and actually build on that.
Yeah, I remember talking to him after the match, and there was one particular decision that he was very unhappy about, and a little bit maybe tilted, but he did end up winning an important game. So I'm sure that he has reset his mindset from that mistake that he did yesterday and is going to be maybe more focused today.
It doesn't matter, though, how you got to day number 3. All it matters is that you're here. So, getting to this best of 5, winning it will be super key. The winner, of course, will be moving on to play Naaman, who is going to advance between BunnyHoppor and Diggen. The battle between Norwegian friends is about to begin. Stay hydrated, though. That's really important. Both you watching and Diggen and myself. I'm going to get a swig of water.
It's going to be really interesting as well to see what deck they actually pick first. And we're about to find out, and it is going to be the Warrior versus the Aggro Paladin.
Yeah, this is a cool matchup, I think. The Warrior that BunnyHoppor is bringing is well equipped to be dealing with the aggression from this Paladin deck. So I would say that this slightly favors BunnyHoppor, especially looking at the Armor Smith and the Deathspite in his starting hand already. Yeah,
and even the Slam as well may not be used early to actually get card draw from, but actually just straight up remove a minion. Like a really good target is like turn 2 Knife Juggler. You respond with a Slam and just remove it straight off the board.
Yeah, sometimes there might be issues for the Warrior to get that full clear against the sticky minions and like things like Blessing of Kings, for example. If you kill those minions with the weapon, you do take quite a bit of damage doing so. And the Pilot Shredder, that's a great card for turn 4 against the Warrior.
Yep, and Diggen's going to start with the Leponome instead of the Argent Squire. I think to just push the damage as fast as possible, because that's definitely something he's going to try and do here, is just try and push as much as possible and just hope he can finish the game before the Warrior can get all those clears.
Double Armor Smith start for BunnyHoppor here. You can't really hope for much better against an aggressive strategy. Those Armor Smiths together are going to add up to a lot of armor very quickly.
And it's pretty important that these Armor Smiths don't snowball. I think Diggen is heavily weighing towards silencing that Armor Smith. You feel like that just completely undermines like almost all of your minions in your deck. Like outside these Pilot Shredders and maybe perhaps a Leroy Jenkins, almost all of them have 1 health.
Yeah, looking at the hand, the Iron Brick Owl seems like fairly obvious, to be honest, because he did not have any other 2-drop. If there was a Shielded Minibot, maybe Knife Juggler, it would have been an option to go for one of those instead, but the Argent Squire, it just felt so weak in comparison to the Owl.
Yeah, I kind of want to see Diggen's face as he sees the second Armor Smith drop down, and he just doesn't respond whatsoever, so fine. But this is definitely rough. This is not the opening you want to see, because even though this first Armor Smith is silenced, it can continue to trade and still gain armor from the second Armor Smith.
There it is.
Diggen would love to have something like a Master for Battle here, but all he can do is the Squire and Hero Power.
Gotcha. He draws Dr. Boom. Definitely one of the heaviest, if not the heaviest card in his deck. And he's going to Hero Power instead, letting BunnyHoppor breathe a little bit here.
Yeah, there was an option to trade the Leper Gnome for the 1-2 to prevent some efficient trading from BunnyHoppor, because he is able to kill both of the minions now, the 1-1, or Silverhand Recruit, and the Leper Gnome without losing any minions now. So there was a decision there. It was definitely an option to trade.
Yeah.
How much do you want to draw cards with things like Acolyte? You know that your opponent really flourishes off cards like Divine Favor. What's the balance that you want to have? Because Patron Warrior is a deck that does require to draw cards to be effective.
I think you do wanna draw with the Acolyte, and looking at it here, there's not really that many other options. There's no good target for the slam. The Divine Shield could be slammed off from the Squire to play around maybe Blessing of Kings, because Blessing of Kings on a Divine Shielded target is certainly something to be scared of.
Yeah, and I think as well, in this specific position that BunnyHoppor's in, it's good to draw cards because you're just cementing your advantage. What he wants to do is just get the patrons on board as quickly as possible. Then it's going to be very hard for Diggen to, actually take the win here. And the Acolyte is just going to help. And also, it's just another minion that trades so well with these 1 health minions and continues to gain armor from the Armor Smith as well.
Yeah, Acolyte of Pain is almost guaranteed to be drawing multiple cards against the Paladin in many situations. There could have been something like a True Silver Champion, Keeper of Uldaman, or Blessing of Kings, but even if there was a Kings, the Paladin would probably not be trading into the Acolyte. Consecration is a card that might sometimes be hard to get value out of against the Warrior, because the Warrior doesn't tend to play multiple minions, aside from the Grim Patrons, where it's not really going to get the job done because it doesn't get fully killed.
Although the Consecrate helped clear the board there, and he's just going to leave the Acolyte up because he chips for 1 extra damage. But it did mean he couldn't play the Shredder, which is really tough because as the aggressive deck, you really want to just stack on those minions and make the Warrior respond. But because of BunnyHoppor's super strong start, he's been able to just fend that off. And now he has a couple of options. He can actually Deathbite is actually looking pretty good with the Dread Corsair, or he can even hold the Dread Corsair at this point because he's not really representing too much damage on the Paladin side of the board here.
Yeah, turn 4, if you have a Deathbite, you usually want to play it, but here it feels a tiny bit off because there's no good target to attack with it. It just seems a bit wasteful to use a Deathbite attack on a 1-1. But he might still do it, even without the Grim Patron.
I think the trade in there and then told us he wasn't going to play the Frothing Berserker because there was no reason to not play that first and gain just that little bit extra damage. So he's going to lock that in. He's going to drop the Dread Corsair down this turn. He doesn't have Battle Rage in hand as well, so it's not like he wants to save the Dread Corsair and wait to damage it next turn and gain additional card draw from the Battle Rage.
If BunnyHoppor was to draw the Grim Patron, he would already have the Inner Rage in his hand. That would potentially develop into a situation where just there's not much that Diggen could do.
It's not quite Grim Patron, but it is free. I mean, Dread Corsair can be really powerful for tempo, especially if you develop a Frothing Berserker behind it. I mean, this is pretty hard for the Paladin to effectively get to past 2 taunts, especially now that they use Consecration.
Certainly is. BunnyHoppor just going to use the Inner Rage here. Not too worried about that.
Oh my.
I don't mind.
Not too greedy with waiting with that. Saving the Inner Rage is something that you often see because it helps to create multiple patrons in one turn. But he feels confident going forward even without the Inner Rage available anymore.
The Creeper initially looks like a bit of a bad drop because of the Deathbite, but because the Creeper came out after the Deathbite was played, the Death Rattle goes off afterwards, which was why BunnyHoppor had to trade into the Spider first, create those tokens, then clear it off with the weapon.
Yikes! And now all of a sudden that Frothing Berserker is looking really scary. Dr. Berserker, so to speak. 7-2 Dread Corsairs. I love that that's just a thing in our community. Anytime a minion is between 2 copies of minions, we just assume it has a PhD.
Hey, most of the players here do.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, BunnyHoppor literally is a doctor. As much as we made a bunch of those jokes this weekend.
From Diggen's point of view, that taunted Shielded Minigod bot could potentially save him from taking the damage from the Frothing, but we know better. There's the Fiery War Axe, so with that Fiery War Axe and the Dread Corsair, BunnyHoppor is able to connect to Diggen's face with that scary Frothing Berserker.
And I really like the second Frothing here. It might be a bit, it might seem, oh well, Shredder fits the curve a little bit better, but the Frothing Berserkers are just going to end the game, and that's why you play them. So pretty crazy start for BunnyHoppor there.
Yeah,
Certainly
definitely. Strong game 1 win for our German player. Being able to get onto the board in this mirror match is pretty influential because then it just narrows down the matchups that you can avoid.
It's already a good matchup for the Warrior player, and he had the double Armor Smith start. It's just that was awesome. And also seeing Diggen go for that hero power on turn 3. It's just so weak on an early turn 2.
Yeah,
he already using the hero power.
He was almost just always behind, and then when you put in key cards like Despite, I mean, we didn't even need a patron there. You know, you just see the Despite, the removal, the double Armor Smith. It's almost like too difficult to come back from in any situation.
Yeah, and it felt like there was just no power swing turns from this Paladin deck that it usually gets. Sometimes the early game board builds up so much, it dumps a lot of the cards and buffs effectively, and then it can refill with Divine Favor. He drew some of those cards, but just was never given the ability to develop proactively. Meanwhile, the patron got free 3/3 taunts, was able to develop an 11/3 attack on turn 5 or 6. It was pretty nuts. We got the poll results. It looks like Diggen started to fight back a little bit. We saw the tweets also supporting in the top right corner of your screen as the game was going on. A lot of people are cheering on Diggen. They really love his friendly demeanor as well as some of his plays. So BunnyHoppor, even though right now he's losing in the polls, there's still some people cheering for him. Make sure to get out there and hashtag HCT. Before we go into game number 2, we mentioned that he was a former chess champion. Let's get to know him a little bit better beyond that as well. BunnyHoppor from Germany.
I'm Raphael, I'm 24. I'm currently living in Oslo, but I'm originally from Cologne, Germany. Yeah, I played competitive chess until I was 18, and so I started that when I was 7, and that was great fun. I used to play county regional championships every year, and that was basically a planned part of my Easter holidays, and it was always fun, rather than just competition. I think the overlap between Hearthstone and chess is quite great because it really requires you to think about your opponent's possibilities. Then you also have to think a few turns ahead, and you also have to think tactically. And in chess, it's just the moves that now are a specific combination. In Hearthstone, it's, of course, which plays the best.
And that's going to do it. You guys have gone over it 1,000 times already. BunnyHoppor is moving on to the Europe Winter Championship. What a ride for him.
I got a master's degree in theoretical chemistry at the University of Oxford, and I'm working on my PhD in a 4-year program at the University of Oslo. Currently, I'm working on the investigation of organic chemistry with means of computer simulations, and also work on computer simulations of proteins that are involved in the visual cycle. Before the preliminaries, my schedule of the week used to be like, firstly, go to work 9 to 5. Tuesdays and Thursdays play volleyball as well as go to a language class. Monday and Wednesday play some Hearthstone tournaments to wrap some BlizzCon points, then just save the weekend for going out with friends. In order to be really, really good at the game, I would need to invest more time into the game than I currently have on my hands. I'm totally okay with having a set limitation, firstly from my skills and secondly from my time to the game, just by setting other priorities higher, but that's my decision, and therefore I will live with the consequences and see how far I can make it at the level that I play right now. I'm BunnyHoppor, and I'm here to prove that I have what it takes to make it to BlizzCon.
Balancing a well-diverse lifestyle, just having school, having a bunch of activities, having friends. I only know one of those things, which is Hearthstone, that he's actually balancing. I think BunnyHoppor is a really good example of what people are looking for in some of these tournaments. They look at it and they say, I don't have the time to play Hearthstone 8 hours a day. BunnyHoppor is recognizing maybe he's not the most skilled player here. He says, in fact, if I dedicate more time, I probably could be a lot better. But he's going to play to the best of his abilities. And I think that's a really good example for anybody who's watching now and wants to be part of the championship tour.
Yeah, even though Hearthstone might not be his main focus right now, he is clearly very talented, and his skill set from the chess background is something that I could easily imagine would translate well to being a good player in Hearthstone as well.
Absolutely. So going into game number 2, we'll see whether or not he can continue the momentum that he has all weekend long. Will he be able to keep Diggen pressured down, or will Diggen strike back? We'll find out in game number 2 here.
Yeah, one of the benefits Diggen has now, even though it sounds kind of weird because he's 1-0 down, is that there's now only 2 classes left for BunnyHoppor to choose, so he can maybe direct his next pick a bit more strongly. And he's locked in the Paladin again and got what I think is a pretty good matchup against the Druid.
Yeah, it certainly is. Swipe is a great card to have against the Paladin, but it's just an inner, no wild growth yet, no proactive plays. So it's going to be interesting to see how BunnyHoppor chooses to go about this hand.
Yeah, again, I brought this question up to Brian Kibler, and I'll go ahead and toss it out. A lot of players, they don't really ever want to throw Swipe away against Paladin as a Druid player. And we did see it happen last game, which ended up working out okay because he got 2 Living Roots. In this case, do you feel like you're more along the line? Do you want to throw Swipe away for a better chance to utilize Innervate into a minion?
It's a kind of an awkward situation. It feels a bit weird because it is a reactive play, and sometimes when you keep it, you might not even find a perfect one. But if you throw it away, it's quite possible that you'll never see a Swipe again in the first 6 or whatever turns. And if you don't have access to the Swipe, it just might be impossible to clear the Paladin side off the board.
Yeah, and he did keep hold of it just for that safety net, like you said. You know, it's going to feel so much worse. Like if you have the Swipe, you're always going to find, you know, a way to use it against aggro Paladin. Whereas if you throw it away, turn 3 happens after a curve 1-2 muster, you're like, what did I do? Oh my god.
I regret everything.
I miss you, Swipe. Come back.
I may or may not have been laying in my bed with a Wolverine costume.
Yeah.
Stroking Swipe in a picture perfect.
The light protects me.
BunnyHoppor does.
May or may not. Yeah, sorry. You're about to say something really insightful.
I don't even remember what it was anymore.
All right,
That image is in Savits's head, and that's all he needs for the rest of this cast.
No coin being utilized there, although, I mean, he does have an interesting amount of plays that he drew that shielded mini bot. What do you think is going through Diggen's head there, Savits?
I think it's pretty nice to keep the coin since the turn 1 play without the coin was completely reasonable. Having access to the coin for later on could potentially allow him to play something like a Dr. Boom 1 turn earlier, and that just might win the game for him.
Yeah, or even this potential play of attacking Coghammer attack again, and you put the Divine Shield on to the Argent Squire and give it taunt, and then just have to sort of deal with whatever comes out of the Shredder. But there is pretty likely that Diggen might try and choose to ignore this, but it's just come out so early that it says the guys were mentioning before, when Druids face against a hyper-aggressive deck, they want to sort of become the aggressor itself.
Yeah, it's very likely that he's just gonna go for the shielded mini bot here though, because look, those 2 divine shielded minions are pretty much impossible for BunnyHoppor to clear right now, so the Coghammer value is still going to be there next turn.
Yeah, and like you said, he does keep hold of the coin as well, so it continues to give the Paladin a lot more options going into the later turns where maybe he can make a much more impactful turn.
Certainly. BunnyHoppor has a Wrath, but that's all he can do here besides the hero power, so I think we might just see a hero power here, because Wrath seems something that can work very well even later on against something like a Knife Juggler.
Yeah, against aggressive decks, Wrath actually has a lot of value to reach past minions that are taunted up, or, you know, like for example, Knife Juggler is a card that's not exactly the easiest to snipe if you don't have a Keeper of the Grove, and I think there's a lot more versatility. However, what Wrath does do is it helps develop his hand even further because he still has a couple of awkward cards. I do like keeping the Wrath. I do also want to add one more thing. I feel like Pilot Shredder does have some downsides. One of them is that when you innervate it out, it's not exactly the best minion to fight against aggressive decks.
What?
And Savits looks really confused by that attack into the Divine Shield on the Argent Squire.
I really did not expect to see him attack into the Squire instead of killing it off the mini, but the reasoning behind that might be something like a coin placing of King's potential, but definitely a tiny bit surprised by that
also,
play.
Do you think he's actually just setting up for a bigger swipe? Yeah. I mean, you know, he is also looking into that photograph, just thinking, I want to play you next turn. He's just like making it as perfect as possible, because if muster happened, which, to be honest, with that exact play from BunnyHoppor, I imagine if Diggen even had muster, he probably wouldn't have played it that turn, because it just signaled swipe so hard there.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Maybe in this case, he made it a little bit too obvious what his play was. And he said, you know what, my hand, I don't have anything else besides Swipe and Wrath next turn. I'll make the best of it. In this case, now he can get rid of the board. And hopefully cards like Azure Drake and Drew the Claw will carry him back in it.
Yep. He had the option here to just Wrath for 1 to get that card draw and trade off the Shrinkmeister in order to be able to... Because now it's gonna die to the weapon anyway, right? So
yeah.
There's not that much value in keeping it, but he decides that he does not need the extra card, and rather keeps the keeps the Shrinkmeister around for another turn.
Yeah, and
Whoa.
but BunnyHoppor's actually got a really strong hand to follow up with as well, depending on where this jungle goes.
Oh,
wow.
Don't get it.
Nice.
Because now BunnyHoppor can choose either one of his flurry of 5 drops here if he wants to just put the Druid of the Claw in taunt. Maybe he wants to swipe, but still doesn't look too great. But also next turn he has Force of Nature, which probably isn't going to be used as the typical Druid combo in this game. Having 3 separate minions that will almost certainly kill off any of the Paladin minions each is going to be really strong, and he's probably going to look to try and follow that up next turn just to clear the board again.
Seems like he was looking at the swipe here, a tiny bit of a mistake by him potentially to hover over the swipe over the juggler, because he did for a moment there. I'm sure that was something that Diggen picked up. So now if BunnyHoppor chooses to make a different line of play, Diggen does have that information that there is maybe a Wrath swipe or a Living Roots in BunnyHoppor's hand.
Yeah, that's true.
I think-
Removal options or keep with the grove.
Yeah.
I guess the point still stands.
I think also, like we said earlier, the way he made the turn of earlier trading into 2 Divine Shields was pretty much like, yeah, I've got swiped. So Diggen's probably expecting it anyway. This is a tough turn. I think just as Druid of the Claw into taunt is just as safe a play as you can make, and then you can go into either swipe Hero Power next turn, which is going to be pretty good, or the Force of Nature if anything gets a bit too hectic.
I wouldn't completely have hated it if he charged into the Knife Juggler to play around something like a Blessing of Kings, but this certainly is like the more solid option.
Yeah, you're right. Blessing of Kings would have destroyed this. But it's like you said, you do have to swipe the following turn. And based off the hand of Diggen, it wasn't exactly a great follow-up. In fact, outside this Business Sergeant, it's pretty much just the minions on board that will be the continual repetitive damage. As this aggro paladin, you do want to leverage the spells to finish the game. You want to develop the board, and then hopefully, if you need anything else, then you Divine Favor to redraw.
Yeah, and I think Diggen's definitely thinking about how he can trade with this Druid of the Claw whilst making a swipe-proof board as possible, right? Because there's nothing that looks too great here. Now that the juggle's hit, he can run the Creeper in and use his weapon and save the Divine Shield on the Ardent Squire, which is going to be important.
The fact that Diggen, that BunnyHoppor hovered over the swipe would actually be a huge deal here, because it could have been something that Diggen picked up on and maybe tried to play around it here, but he is going to kind of play into the swipe here. He's going to take his chances, just hope for the best that BunnyHoppor has any other cards except for the swipe.
It's kind of interesting that last turn, because he could have actually, before he made those trades, played Coghammer again, his second one. He would lose the charges, which over time is a lot of damage, but if that Creeper hit got the Divine Shield, then did the trade, then his board's even, his board probably wouldn't quite look like this at this moment.
It's true. Diggen played perfectly into it. All right.
Yeah, I think 3 mana for 2 cards. An Arcane Intellect is probably going to be okay here, as the rest of his options are pretty terrible.
Yeah, I mean, it's not too great still, but he could play the Coghammer first, go for the Divine Favor for 3 cards. That's decent, at least. Just going to reinforce, and I guess the second Coghammer, saving the Divine Favor a little bit later on.
Sure. That 1-1 with Divine Shield and Taunt is still pretty annoying for Drew to get past, especially since he used Wrath and Swipe already. Like, for example, big minions would have to run into it.
This guy, they equipped him with Divine Shield and Taunt to stand alone against Dr. Boom. Still don't think it's going to be quite good enough.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Boom is pretty powerful here. I think BunnyHoppor is evaluating, again, what about cards like Blessing of Kings? But I think your opponent's sure that he didn't have it previously.
I think at this point you can make the call that, okay, it's very unlikely that it would be there because of what happened against the Daunted Druid of the Claw, because if there was that Kings, it certainly would have been played that turn. It's hard to justify any other play than Dr. Boom for BunnyHoppor here.
What if he thinks that he has too many cards and he wants to Loatheb to shut down like Divine Favors and other spells? Because it seems like Diggen's holding a lot of cards. He had 6 mana and he passed 3 of it away.
Yeah, but in case that Diggen was holding on to Dr. Boom, which is one of the cards that he was unable to play at that turn, to playing a Loatheb and then seeing your opponent play a Dr. Boom, it just leaves you with a really bad board state.
Yeah, and also BunnyHoppor's actually on 15 life now. He's not like hovering around 20 feeling safe. Like, there's still a chance that a lot of burst damage could come out of nowhere from the Paladin. So I like the Dr. Boom just because it just pushes back harder, right, than the Loatheb. The Loatheb cuts out some of the more techie stuff like this Divine Favor, but the Dr. Boom just presents so much damage. And what is this 1-1 actually going to do this turn?
Yep. And here's the Divine Favor. Picks up 2 Master of Battles. That's it's a tiny bit off. One of those would have been great earlier, but now it's hard to get both of those played and efficiently
At least he's
used.
seen a swipe, right?
That's true.
That's the silver lining in that scenario.
Yeah. Force of Nature Savage Roar would be lethal, but there's only 8 mana available, and BunnyHoppor is also still missing that roar.
Okay, well, he does have a few 5-drops. In fact, all of these 5-mana minions introduce different ways you can play onto the board or around your opponent's hand here.
I actually wouldn't mind. I think you'd run the Boombot in first to see what happens, but I wouldn't even potentially mind Force of Nature to maybe try and clear the board and just leave Dr. Boom there, because he's pretty much shown last turn that he doesn't have Keeper of Uldaman, right? Because he just would have done it on Dr. Boom to reduce the damage down. So you can push for 7 and then just push again next turn. And maybe if you draw Savage Rot, he has the Druid of the Claw for charge as well. So he could potentially finish the game in 2 turns.
And definitely gonna push that 7 to face here. The only other decision, I believe, like really big decision, is whether to play the low tap or the Druid of the Claw. But the low tap seems very... Oh! He actually deals with that.
Oh, that's funny.
2 mana muster for battle.
No, 7.
It's like, yes, I get cheaper spells.
It
Wait,
was 2 mana.
just kidding. Well, I don't think there's a way to deal with it. Diggen just concedes, and that's a 2-0 lead for BunnyHoppor, putting himself on match point, having to win just 1 more game.
Yeah, Diggen really struggling with this Paladin deck in this particular series. The draws have not been what he has been hoping for, and the early game has been a little bit lackluster in both of these games.
Yeah, I think frustration actually is one of those things that could quite easily be kicking in for Diggen now, because game 1, his opponent has double Armor Smith, the double taunts from the Deathbite as well, and then game 2, the Druid just innovates out Shredder. So it's just like, oh my, okay, what's game 3 going to bring?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where like the hand was dictating that he didn't want to play into swipe, but he played into swipe anyways because his hand was kind of awkward. So just bad news for Diggen overall.
I kind of keep going back into the moment where BunnyHoppor hovered over the swipe, swiped the turn before he used it, because that gave Diggen the information that it's very likely that there's a swipe, but then he still played right into the swipe and gave away the full clear for BunnyHoppor. Maybe it was something that he did not pick up, or maybe he thought that it could be not swipe, but
Keeper of the
it seemed
Grove.
pretty likely there. Because Living Root should have been played, and 1 Wrath was already casted. Maybe Keeper of the Grove, but aside from that, maybe he could have drawn into the conclusion that the swipe was there.
Well, the number one thing that he has to focus on right now is just the game in front of him. I mean, the game is already over. You can go back and evaluate the series. We did mention that Diggen is one of the most self-critical players out of the top 8. He really cares about playing well, even to the same degree that he cares about winning, right? A lot of these players, they play Hearthstone to challenge themselves to try to play with the littlest amount of mistakes as possible. So when the stakes are this high and you have these many people watching and you're putting yourself out there, it's definitely intense. Let's get to know Diggen a little bit more about our proud Norwegian player and see what he has to say right before we go into game number 3.
My name is Eirik Diggen Aarvig. It means a lot to me to play for Norway and Gamers League in this tournament. Yeah, I'm just a proud Norwegian. I started playing Hearthstone at the release, and after a while I had to join the army. I was still really into Hearthstone when I joined. But the first 2 months they took our electronics away, and yeah, it was a nightmare. And then I became a guard, which was perfect for me, because there was a lot of dead time and yeah, a lot of time to play Hearthstone. As a guard in the army, there was 1 post where we had to watch the security cameras. That was my favorite post, because I could just play Hearthstone and look at the security cameras once in a while. At the place I worked, we had signals when our higher-ups came, so we could see them entering the building. So it wasn't a problem. My name is Diggen, and this weekend I'm gonna make Gamers League proud.
All right. right, so Diggen needs to start winning, because right now his back is to the wall. If he loses any more games, he is out. And as much as he wants to represent Norway, his practice partner, BunnyHoppor, is definitely looking to end the series next game. And what's really funny, too, is that the deck that Diggen's been losing with, the Aggro Paladin, is the deck that finally remains in BunnyHoppor's lineup. So what if we just change strategies and then all of a sudden Diggen's the one changing momentum?
Yeah, I mean, if Diggen was able to lose with it 2 times, maybe BunnyHoppor is able to lose with it 3 times, but this is favoring BunnyHoppor right now so much because at worst there's the mirror match and then 2 other chances to just take it down.
Yeah, I kind of like this because Diggen switching to Druid. All I want to see is Diggen win 2 games and then the final game be the Aggro Paladin mirror for the decider. But he's got to work with the Druid first and see what he can do. And Wild Growth with Shredders seems pretty decent.
Certainly does. Paladin Shredder also not bad. No swipe for Diggen. Might be something he would like to have, but whenever you have a Wild Growth in your hand, you're not too sad. It can be, it was discussed in the previous match, I believe, that against some aggressive decks, Wild Growth on turn 2 is not necessarily the greatest thing always, but I mean, I kind of like it.
Yeah, I think it's important for the Druid here, as we've discussed in the previous Aggro Paladin versus Druid matches. You want to get a sort of decent minion on as early as possible and start pushing for damage yourself, and provide Diggen with the same problem he had versus BunnyHoppor.
That's pretty good. Getting that Living Roots for turn 1, certainly something that you want to have against the Paladin deck. If he didn't draw that, he probably would have to use the coin to get the Wild Growth out.
Yeah, and that means the difference of maybe the Argent Squire being a little bit stronger, and then all of a sudden Coghammer and Keep of Voldemort really keeps the board under control. These kinds of things, like just like a small Living Roots where you don't expect it to have that much impact. In fact, we were looking at cards like Darnassus Aspirant to be the big MVP for the Druid in that expansion, but Living Roots has firmly supplanted itself.
Yeah, I completely agree.
As the card to look at. All right, thank you, Raven. Safi's just kind of like, yeah, ignore it. I'll wait for Frodan to finish. Sorry. all good. But yeah, Living Roots is super effective here. Yep.
Yeah, it is. It's such a nice card to have against the early aggressive decks, and also there's Azure Drake has kind of become a staple to be running 2 off, and when you have that 6 mana going for Drake and using the 3 damage Living Roots on something like front half of a Piloted Shredder is also a great tempo play.
Yeah, and something that BunnyHoppor has in his hand that we didn't see from Diggen in the first 2 games was the Keeper of Uldaman. That card is so flexible as it can actually buff your own minions, and so you can push for more damage and just spread the power you have on the board across multiple minions to make it more difficult to deal with. Or also it can just tone down your opponent's minions. So key targets against Druid would be like Druid of the Claw, a Dr. Boom, even an Ancient of Law, just for an easy trade potentially.
Yeah, speaking of potentially easy trades, if Diggen ends up going for Pilot Shredder, that is really convenient for using the Keeper of Uldaman, like he said. And you get to develop reasonable board, and you still have a lot of weapon charges, which is really effective.
Yeah, the Piloted Shredder, it's looking so tempting here, but Diggen knows what's in BunnyHoppor's deck, and it could get punished, so good for him. He seems to be going for a different line of play here.
And the thing is as well, it wouldn't even just be punished because he could trade with the first half of it. He could actually owl it next turn, just remove it completely, which would be huge.
Yeah, that's also a good point too. He had flexibility in his plays. Diggen chooses to keep the coin because he has 2 7-mana minions that he'd want to play. So as much as getting Living Roots is great on the board, he recognizes weapon with his opponent, doesn't want to lose it, and he wants to have that ability to push out higher pressure onto the board.
Yeah, getting to play that Dr. Boom 1 turn earlier is nothing short of amazing.
Yeah, and that mini-bot draw was actually pretty big for BunnyHoppor as well. Like, he didn't have anything that fit too well. You don't really want to just play Keeper of Uldaman as a 3-4 onto the board. But then he only had like Leponome Hero Power. But now he can choose to actually mini-bot Hero Power if he wants, and then do Keeper of Uldaman Leponome next turn to fill out his curve.
Yeah, looks like it. He's going to make this play, getting the Hero Power instead of Leponome to be more mana efficient going further in the game. Now there's also a secured target for the Keeper of Uldaman.
Huh. Well, Innervate allows him to accelerate even faster to a 7-mana minion.
Yeah,
I mean, that's one of the better draws. I was looking at the Shredder and the Living Roots, and then coin into a 7, play a 7 the following turn. But it seems pretty good now.
It's pretty tempting to just go for it here. Even with the coin and the Innervate, he could even play Dr. Boom and the Living Roots if he wanted to.
It's true. Gives him, and it's not like he's devoid of plays the following turn. He has Force of Nature if he wants to remove, or if the board states good enough thanks to Boombots, Pilot Shredder and a Hero Power is good. I do like this idea from Diggen to push out the Dr. Boom.
Yeah, and what's going to be interesting as well is how he chooses to use this Ancient of Lore a bit later in the game, because we saw some good, although it didn't turn out well in the end, like so a pretty strong Divine Favor turn as well. So he might actually use the Ancient of Lore to heal and just further just cement the board. Put a 5/5 on the board, heal for 5, and just stay ahead, because what we're looking at on turn 5 for the Paladin and the Druid's on 26 health, like that's not the way you want this matchup to go as the Paladin player.
Yeah, drawing cards feels a bit weird at times against the Paladin, because you know that if you draw cards, then then your opponent might end up drawing the same amount of cards with the Divine Favor. But on the other hand, right now he's at 26, so life total is not a like a huge consideration.
Yeah, I think what's okay as well is he has good cards in his hand now, so like he doesn't need to draw into an answer particularly. I mean, maybe Swipe would be good, but if he went into it, you know, he couldn't play it for a couple of turns anyway.
Yep.
All right, well, that Keeper of Oldemon, super impactful, reducing Dr. Boom just down to a 3/3, allowing him to trade. And now, all of a sudden, because it doesn't have Swipe, it's not a very convenient clear. However, Boombots can ultimately dictate what he really wants to do. If he ends up, you know, even clearing almost the entire board here.
I actually think that Force of Nature clear would have been something to seriously think about. If this Boombot goes to face, I would like that quite a bit. Yeah, but Shredder, Living Roots, going Hero Power, or there's a lot of options for him here. I'm interested to see what he ends up doing.
Yeah, I like this play. You just put more minions on the board as well and just clear off the 2/1. And all you need against the Paladin is just a board of your own. You've just got to fight, keep the board down, and he's still not under that much pressure. You know, it's going to be just the 3/4 onto the board, which the Shredder at the moment just trades straight into. And still on 21 health with a good follow-up next turn for Ancient of Lore.
Yeah, that was pretty good for Diggen in a way that he actually managed to get rid of a lot of his cards in case that there was that Divine Favor ready and waiting in the BunnyHoppor's hand.
I do like this Consecration. He gets a lot of value off of it. Druid has a lot of mid-sized minions, so it felt like one of the better chances you can use it. And now Diggen has to play this Ancient of Lore.
Yeah, not too bad. He could also go for an Azure Drake Hero Power. He is going to go for the heal, so he's a little bit worried about the Divine Favor or his life total.
Yeah, I think that what he's thinking is if the minions trade in here, then that's good for him because it buys more time. The heal buys him more time because he's just drawn into Savage Roar. So he has combo. If he gets just like 1 or 2 attacks off with a couple of minions, then he can just end the game. And after already seeing 1 Cog Hammer, you think, oh, well, there's not a lot the Paladin can do about it if he just wants to combo to finish the game out.
Well, BunnyHoppor can play mana efficient with Cog Hammer and Keeper of Oldemon. That allows him to buff up the Owl to take out... Oh, sorry. Assuming the Cog Hammer lands either way, he can buff up the Owl. So I kind of like that idea of being able to play pretty efficiently.
Yeah, and the good thing is you don't want to drop Lotheb on a turn 8 for the Druid. You kind of want to drop it next turn to just lock out a combo completely and just know it's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's also true. And here's the Keeper of Oldemon. Looks like he's going to use it on that Owl. Just to get a little bit more board going. It was an option to use it on the Lore instead and just go face with the Cog Hammer. Not take the 5 damage there, because taking 5, it's a little bit scary.
Well, he's got a lot of damage, assuming he had the mana to use it.
Yeah.
In fact, if that was all playable this turn, he'd have lethal. Because he'd be able to use the 4 damage from Face of Savage Roar and then the 18 damage from...
Yeah, he could go drawing with the Drake for an Innervate, but that would still not quite do it on turn 9,
hey,
because 11 mana.
He could just combo, kill the 3/4, go face, and then draw combo again. Just draw that Force of Nature next turn and you'll be fine.
It's true, he might have to use Force of Nature Savage Roar to clear the following turn if he's in a very dire position. He's considering it right now, what he has to do.
Azure Drake into Wrath would be pretty nice, but what if he picks up something that he can't play just yet with the Drake? He's already looking at 11 damage and he's down to 18, so it doesn't feel too good. I wouldn't blame him for playing the Force of Nature here, but it certainly doesn't feel right. Because
especially with 2 Savage Roar in hand, that's the problem, isn't it? If they were any other cards, it would feel a bit better. He's going to go for the slightly risky play of the Drake and 1 mana short of that Keeper of the Grove doing some work.
Yep. Does not find the Wrath. That would have been the dream draw.
And I feel like with Lotheb, that's almost certainly going to lock out Diggen, unless there's some weird card equivalent to Mind Control Tech or something to help swing it. But even then, it'd still be difficult.
Certainly.
What can Diggen pull? He still has enough mana to play a swipe. Would that be enough?
No, I think that's just it. There's nothing he can do here.
No, Darnassus Aspirin's the way. Okay, this is a situation where everyone's like, Darnassus Aspirin is just terrible because it doesn't actually function anything outside of the early game.
Yeah. Diggen looking at his last, and he wants to see if there's any way out of it, but no. And BunnyHoppor is gonna take a 3-0 in this match.
Yep, that's checkmate. And BunnyHoppor goes to the top 4, defeating Diggen to get a playoff berth. And looks like they want to hug it out. You know, they came together, helping each other practice for the preliminaries, battling through hundreds in their region. And even though Diggen's journey ends here, top 6 is a very good finish for him. BunnyHoppor, his story isn't over just yet, and we'll see just how far this PH student, who also is a master champion at chess as well. Really cool to see 2 chess players back-to-back weekends do very well.
Yeah, he did make it through, and you know what? If you're going to lose to someone and get knocked out, you'd like to lose to a friend, right? And just let them move on and hopefully take the tournament for themselves.
Yeah, maybe they can like strategize a little bit together going forward, and if there's anything Diggen can maybe do to help out BunnyHoppor, I'm sure he's going to do it.
All right, well, that wraps it up here from the desk. Let's go over to Nimsh, who is standing fireside with BunnyHoppor, our last semifinalist.
I'm here with BunnyHoppor, and congratulations on advancing to the top 4. That was really nicely played. And the first question I have for you is about the bans for this specific matchup. There was a mirror match, and you both guys banned Warlock. Why is that?
I think we both thought banning Warlock was the strongest strategy here, and also kind of nicely creates... Well, we didn't see any mirror matches, but like, I don't know, seeing maybe the aggro paladin mirror match would have been nice.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Aggro mirror match for the Paladins would be a great match to see. But going into the match, the blind picks for the first round, I think it was really important, and you ended up with Patron versus the Aggro Paladin, which was really good for you. Do you think you won the mind games there?
Well, I was anticipating him to pick the aggro paladin first because, well, he also thinks that I take it first. So that's a very important deck to win with in this series, I think. And kind of the plan was win with patrons, then he picks his patron, I pick my druid into it, get a lucky win, and then I just have to cheese one out with the aggro paladin, and that kind of always works.
And you are going to face Neyman next. How do you feel versus Neyman, and do you think you are going to win easily?
Definitely not. I mean, preliminaries was one thing, and he has very different decks now, and he's an incredibly strong player. I mean, I've really liked discussing with him this week, and it's just really nice every time we talk about decks and plays and whatever, and I really value his opinion, and I think it's going to be a really tough match.
All right, I can't wait for that match myself, but we have our analysts ready to dissect this match specifically. So, TJ, take it away.
Thank you very much, Nimsh. And once again, a big congratulations to BunnyHoppor for moving on to the semifinals. I'm joined on the sidebar by Brian Kibler. And Kibler, we're going to start off with these 2 players here. They both brought Aggro Paladin. Over the course of the 2 championships now, the Americas and the European, we've seen 16 players, and those are the only 2 that brought that type of Paladin deck. So what are your thoughts on the Aggro Paladin, and how does it differ from its Secret Paladin counterpart?
Well, it's interesting that these are actually 2 players who, in the preliminary, they also brought this aggro paladin deck and had a lot of success with it there, clearly making it all the way here. I think a big part of the strength of the deck is the matchup against Secret Paladin. Many players were targeting that with their lineups, and it clearly brought them very far here.
Yeah, and it worked out well for at least one of the players. Diggen also made it pretty far, and he had a lot of success with it. Paladin has been one of the most successful classes so far in the European Championship, I think winning slightly over 50% of its matches so far. So let's take a look at one of the clips, actually. This clip is from, I believe, game number 1. This was an interesting play where BunnyHoppor sort of maybe gave away a little bit of information, but Diggen didn't take that to heart and ended up playing into it. So first of all, I want to talk to you a little bit about the idea of concealing information with your cards. We're going to see BunnyHoppor hover his swipe and actually put it over the knife juggler, but then second guess his opinion. So why is this sometimes not the right thing to do?
Well, anytime you hover those things, your opponent sees the sort of targeting that you're pointing this card at that card, and that gives them some information. Well, if nothing else, you have a card that can target that card. And it's like, well, there aren't that many things you could possibly have in that spot. Swipe, perhaps Wrath being the other one. I actually think that BunnyHoppor kind of gave away his swipe with a previous turn where he chose to just break the 2 Divine Shields on his opposing minions rather than kill one of them. So I imagine it seemed like Diggen should have the information that the swipe was available to BunnyHoppor based on that as well as this play, but he chooses to play into it anyway.
Yeah, he definitely plays right into it. We're going to see as this play plays out. And I have the theory, Brian Kibler, so be entertained by my theory for a second here.
I'm listening.
These guys are pretty good friends. They know each other. We saw them, hug it out after the match was over. And Diggen knows that BunnyHoppor is not the sort of person to give away information like that. So what Diggen might have thought was that BunnyHoppor was giving away the fact that he had swipe as a mind game, that he didn't actually have swipe. So it was the double mind game. Is that a possibility, Kibler?
Therefore,
Expert
I cannot drink the glass in front of me. Is this the, don't go up against a Sicilian with death on the line?
Yes,
Is that what's going on here? Yeah, I mean, there actually is something to be said for, making plays that would make your opponent think that you have certain cards in your hand, or perhaps hovering over certain cards to attempt to sort of deceive your opponent into thinking you have certain options available. So maybe there was some kind of next level gamesmanship going on between Diggen and BunnyHoppor here.
Yeah, we'll have to talk to them later, but there was an opportunity here for Diggen to play around the swipe a little bit more by trying to get the Coghammer onto one of the creatures that he was planning on trading in. He did want the juggles, but he could have had, the Coghammer be played onto the Knife Juggler instead of using the hero power or something along those lines. So there was ways that he could have played around it. So maybe there was, like you said, some of that next level mind games going on. But that was a great series, and of course we will be seeing BunnyHoppor in a few matches. We're going to play out the first semifinal first, but we'll be seeing him later on. So thank you once again for your expert analysis, Kibler. We are going to be going to a quick break before we jump into the first semifinal match, but while we do that, let's take a look at some of those highlights from the last match.